Welcome to Attention Retention with Jackie McManus, your source for the latest trends in transportation recruitment and retention.
Welcome, everyone, to an exciting episode of Attention Retention. I am your host, Jackie McManus, CEO and founder of KJ Media, a recruitment advertising agency specializing in this space. Joining us today, I am honored to have on my good friend, Dr. Tim Ridley of Sirius XM Road Dog Trucking. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Jackie, it's my pleasure. It's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, Tim, you and I were just talking about this before we went live. We've known each other for close to 9 years, officially almost a decade. And I've been a guest on your show every month over the last decade. And now the roles are reversed. I'm absolutely honored to have you on the show today. And you have a wealth of knowledge and experience about how to treat drivers well. And excited to share that with our listeners. But before we dive into the 3 R's, the heartbeat of the show, recruitment, retention, and recognition, could you share a bit about your career with the audience?
Sure. Jackie, I got into trucking. It was a childhood dream of mine, actually.
Right?
So I got into trucking in the mid-1980s, actually, and started out as a company driver. And I came off the road for a while and became a truck driver instructor at a truck driving school. Moved up through the ranks where I was director of job placement, would send students to various companies and get feedback from the students, rather, in terms of how the companies were treating them. Then I moved to director of the school and then started my own trucking company. And so from there, after about 12 years of owning a successful, thank God it was a successful company, came off the road, sold my company and went into recruiting and corporate management at a large trucking company. As a matter of fact, at that time, they were the second largest temperature control company in the country. So
is that right?
Then yes, and that's then I got into radio. So I've been in the radio ever since.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, I was actually even though we've known each other for almost a decade, I was, of course, looking around, looking online, and it's incredible because the encouragement that you give drivers on the road, inspire them every day is just truly remarkable. And so I'm really excited to dive in and really want to kick it off by starting with recruitment. You know, Tim, we talk about this a lot, and I want to hear from your point of view. What strategies have you heard, and also with your previous experience of being in the managerial role, owning your own trucking company and speaking to drivers in today's market, what do you find is some of the most attractive ways or successful ways to attracting talent to an organization in today's market?
Jackie, that's a great question. First of all, drivers, a lot of times people think that truck drivers is who can pay the most, what company can pay the most. That's the most important thing. Mm-hmm. That's not always the case. Of course, money is very important, but what's more important, Jackie, is how the company treats the driver. The driver wants to be made to feel that he or she is a human being and not a machine like they drive. They want to feel that they are a part of the family, part of that company. And that's what most truck drivers are looking for. As a matter of fact, I had a truck driver call me on my radio show earlier this week, and he was just downtrodden and feeling bad because he feels that the motoring public, not only the motoring public, but his company and shippers and receivers think of him as a second-class citizen because he drives a truck. And that shouldn't be so.
No, and that's such a shame because drivers really are the lifeline and the folks that are out there, you know, not 9 to 5. You all know that. You know, they're missing the holidays, they're missing the weekends,
right.
Kids' sports. And you and I talk about this often. And when we have callers call in, we find that drivers will say, you know, maybe the pay's not as much at this other company, but the CEO knows my name or the director knows my name. They know their wife's name. And that really makes a difference. And it's how can companies really nurture that relationship. We're in a relationship industry, like most industries, but especially trucking. It really has old school roots. And I find that I'm constantly talking to clients about that. But for clients, they need to take that time to get to know the driver. And I agree with you. Pay, yes, it's important. We all need it. We all need it. We need to pay our bills.
Right.
But they also really need to focus on how to build that relationship with drivers. What have you found is more like, successful onboarding programs or mentorship programs in the field as it relates to bringing drivers on board?
It's ironic that you asked me that question, Jackie. For the last couple of days,
All right.
yeah,
I didn't know
I
that.
had a driver. It's like ESP.
Yeah.
I had one of my listeners, and Nutty Buddy. He may have, Nutty Buddy, right?
Buddy? Yeah, of course.
He's mentoring a driver, not through the company, but this is a new driver at his company, the company he drives for. And this guy has about a year of experience, but he still is making a lot of mistakes. So Nutty Buddy has taken him under his wings to, not at the direction of the company, but because of, the kindness and the goodness of his heart, to try to educate him. Because Nutty Buddy feels that this guy is going to get hurt, going to hurt himself and or unfortunately hurt a bunch of other people. So that being said, Jackie, you mentioned the key word, mentorship. I think more companies need a mentorship type program where young drivers or new drivers, not all the new drivers are young drivers, but new drivers coming into the industry can be mentored and can feel like they are free to share their thoughts and their fears and their concerns, because this is a new industry. They're in charge now of a 80,000-pound vehicle, that's 75 feet long and 70 to 75 feet long. So that's a lot of responsibility. And as you were mentioning too, the fact of being away from home, being away from family, a lot of truck drivers never been away from home for that extended amount of time, away from family and so forth. So there's a lot that's thrown at them, seems like all at one time. So a mentorship program should be real good, would be real good rather. And another thing you mentioned, Jackie, is that know your drivers, know their names, not just a number, driver number so-and-so. Know that driver by Fred or Susie or Johnny or Brenda, whoever they are, and take the time to learn their birthdays and their birthdays of the kids and their anniversary with their spouse or significant other. So all of those things are so important to helping to retain, not only to recruit, but to retain drivers, and word of mouth gets around.
It sure does. And obviously I'm in the advertising world and the advertising space, and we know how much carriers spend on a monthly basis to get their brand out there and to promote their brand to professional truck drivers. And it's always disheartening to me when I hear, we're spending X amount of dollars, but our turnover rate's 120%. And for me, I say, pause. Before we need to spend more dollars, let's look at how we are onboarding the drivers. Let's look at how we're treating the drivers. Let's look how we're retaining them, and spending that time and allocating resources to their team, training the recruiters, training the operations team, so that they can have better relationships with the drivers. Throwing more dollars at the advertisements is not the solution, because like you just said, such a great point, word of mouth is the number one and it's the best way. I mean, it's the way companies really should get their brand out there. If you hear from a friend, a family member, that's a beautiful thing. And, with social media these days, I mean, yes, you can rate a company, Indeed, Facebook, Glassdoor. There's so many ways to rate a company, free public speech. And so by companies taking the time to really evaluate how they're getting to know the driver, I think that's really critical in today's world to stay competitive and to attract the next generation of drivers as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That in a nutshell.
And I also wanted to echo one of your points as well about the mentorship programs, kind of circling back to that. What we're finding in today's market, Tim, it's interesting. Maybe 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, a lot of folks were getting into the industry because their family members were in the industry.
Right.
Where now, because of advertisements, folks are joining the industry. They see maybe, let's call it, ABC Trucking's advertisement with a $20,000 sign-on bonus, and they're making $100,000, which, when it boils down, it's not really that. But they join the industry and they're like, this is not what I expected whatsoever. So by having that mentorship, they would be able to really learn the ins and outs within that first year of their program. So hats off to Nutty Buddy for really taking that driver under his wing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I was in recruiting, this was a long time ago, excuse me, but Jackie, we found out that if you can keep a driver for 90 days, that was the crucial point at that time, then they were more than likely to stay with you for at least a year. And that pivotal point, just as again, as we were talking about a new driver, you're right. They may not, they will not be making six figures their first year. Because they're going to be on training pay at first, and then they have to work their way up to getting to that pay that a more experienced driver has. So that's when a lot of people give up. A lot of truck drivers will give up because they have this big idea that, oh, I'm going to make six figures in my first year. It's not going to happen. Second year, you're more than likely to reach that goal, but definitely not in that first year.
You and I talk often about this word, honesty.
Right.
For almost a decade, we've been talking about it. How in your, previously when you were in your, managerial role, how did you train your recruitment team to be transparent and be honest within that first phone call with the driver? I'd love to get some tips on that and share that with the audience.
Sure, Jackie. Plain and simple. Honesty is the best policy. And I used to tell my recruiters, I would say, look, you want to recruit a driver, telling him or her the truth, and be able to look that truck driver in the face, in the eye, in their eyes when you see them 6 months later, knowing that you told them the truth. You don't want just the opposite. If you see them in the terminal and they come down the hall coming towards you, you dart into a room because you can't look them in the eye and feel good about what you told them during the recruiting process. So don't be focused so much on trying to fill a seat, but instead focus on telling the truth to get that seat filled.
I mean, you couldn't have said it better. And I'm even now encouraging our clients, a lot of recruiters get paid on how many drivers they get into the seat. And I say, let's focus on how long the drivers are staying as some form of a retention bonus versus how many people you can get in, because that changes the conversation completely. They're going to be focused on having that conversation with the driver to understand if it's a good fit for them. And I think it's okay if a driver, let's call it Jimmy Bob, is not the best fit for your company. Let them know and say, listen, I don't think this is the best fit for you, but this trucking company might be more up your alley. And having that honesty, because Jimmy Bob might have 2-3 other friends that are interested in your company, and you want to be able, back to that word of mouth, have him be able to spread the good word about your company.
Absolutely. You're getting ready to go to MATS, the Mid-America Trucking Show. When I used to go to MATS when I was working in the corporate field and within the trucking company that I was with. Even as a recruiter, when I was a recruiter, I would go. Now, Jackie, you mentioned something that's very, very powerful and which is true. There were many times when a driver would come up to my booth and I knew that I could not help them with what they needed. They needed something that I could not offer. I would walk them over to the what used to be Pike's Truck Lines. They're out of business now, but the recruiter over there, he was a great guy. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but he was a great guy. I would take him over there, or by listening to them, if I felt like Doug, he was a recruiter for another company that pulled air freight. I would walk them over there, hand carry them, so to speak. It's not about me being greedy, or a company for that matter being greedy, because you don't want that driver to leave your booth or to get off the phone with you because you want to take that driver. But look at the best interest. What's in the best interest of that driver? So that's what's so important. And then the thing about it, another thing I would tell my recruiters, Jackie, is that if you do the right thing, honesty, treat people right, success will come. That ingredient, right, or that formula right there, success will come. All you have to do is do the right thing.
I'm writing that down because that's going to be the show notes of this in the show notes of this podcast. It's so true, and the core principles that we're taught as children really do apply when it comes in today's world. Even with the amount of AI and technology that's out there to support recruiters, having that honest integrity conversation, I think, is absolutely critical. I want to shift gears. I want to talk about retention. And I think you're probably an incredible poster child for this, Tim, to be honest, about the role of career growth opportunities, from being a CDL driver to starting your own company, building your company, selling it, to managerial at a large trucking firm, to now, the number one radio show in trucking right now. And it started with your CDL. Let's talk about the role of professional development and career growth opportunities that are out there for drivers.
That's great that you brought that up, Jackie. And as you know, I've mentioned this on my show to my listeners periodically, but I've always said this: trucking has so many avenues, so many arteries, so many veins that you can travel, that you can go. So in other words, the sky is the limit. You may start out as a driver. Excuse me. If that doesn't work for you, you can eventually go into the office, get into training, get into the office, go into safety, get into corporate management, become a dispatcher, or become a department lead, or whatever the case is. So many times that a person may think, well, he or she is a truck driver, they'll never move up any further than where they are. That's not true. And first of all, I never liked the fact to hear somebody say, well, he's just a truck driver, or she's just a truck driver. Truck drivers they come from all walks of life. Some don't have a college degree, others do. Yeah. Some come from a rural area, and some come from the city. So it doesn't matter. But the fact of the matter is, you have to be smart. I was just talking about this last week, I believe it was. You have to be smart to be a truck driver. You have to know mathematics. You got to know geography. You have to be able to do time management very well. You have to manage, because you have to manage yourself, and sometimes you have to manage others as well. But anyway, the opportunities are limitless. To get back to what you were asking, the opportunity is phenomenal in trucking. There was a guy that I knew many years ago, and he was a CDL driver. Okay. And he decided that it wasn't for him. It wasn't for him at all. So he just bought his time. He was diligent. He did everything the company asked him to do. And it wasn't before too many years, that they asked him if he would become a dispatcher, come into the office and become a dispatcher. He did that. He didn't like it, but again, he was diligent with it. He continued to move up through the ranks, and believe it or not, Jackie, he ended up becoming the owner when the original owner, right? Retired owner of that company. He was able to buy that company from being a truck driver with that company.
That's absolutely incredible. And I think that's what's a great success story there. And I think it gets overlooked in our industry. I could say that even on the management side, a lot of our clients, and I have to say this, Tim, some of the best run trucking firms out there, management, they started as a CDL driver.
Yep.
They know what it's like. They mastered that skill. They rise up. They maybe go to dispatch, to recruiting, to director level, to then CEO of the company, owner, for your example. But they're running some of the best trucking organizations out there with the lowest turnover rate because they know what it's like to be a driver. And so with each and every driver out there, when there's a will, there's a way. There is a way. And companies nowadays really are trying to define these career paths. I was speaking to a big carrier last week, and they were telling me that they actually have leadership training available for CDL drivers. So if they're interested in potentially going into managerial roles one day, they will put them in a course. It's about a 6 or 7 month course. And it's essentially like a college course, essentially. And they'll have a mentor, and they'll teach them the ropes, P&L statements and running the book of business. But I thought that was incredible to have that type of opportunity to give to drivers, and because that people that have that experience as a CDL driver, they're just going to make our industry a better place because they know what it's like, and they know what it's like with a load. And I really love what you said, being a driver. There's a lot of skill sets that you need to be a really good truck driver. Mathematics, management, and it often goes overlooked, and it should have, because there's so many incredible roles that your position could turn into. Now, what would you say, Jim, is... Right. In your history and, speaking to drivers like you do on a daily basis, what are some of the best ways for companies to keep their drivers engaged and loyal and, excited about their line of work? Obviously, there's a lot of good days. There's a lot of bad days, right? I mean, it's like any line of work. So what would be some of your feedback to trucking companies that are looking to engage and create really cultivate a culture of appreciation?
Sure. First of all, have an open door policy. And I'll get back to that in just a little bit, because I'm going to use something as an example first. But one of the things, if I can circle back to something that we originally talked about as far as wanting to feel appreciated. One of the things I used to do in management, Jackie, is that on a Friday afternoon before I left the office, because I knew that my drivers were not going to be going home. Most of them were not anyway. Some were, but there were going to be a lot of drivers that were going to be running over the weekend. So I would send them out a mass message via Qualcomm at that time to thank them for what they did. Thank you for what you do. And I really appreciate you, not only for myself, but from me rather, but on behalf of this company. We appreciate you. Be safe. And again, thank you for all you do. And then another thing, and then just something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be exactly, like that, but it's just something to let them know, look, before I leave the office today, I'm thinking about you. I appreciate you. So another thing that I would do is, truck drivers love to eat. Okay. They love to eat. I love to eat.
Me too, Jim. Me too.
And one of the things that I would do is periodically I would throw a barbecue. And I would send out a mass message via Qualcomm again. Any driver, any of you who are in this area in Atlanta or going through, passing through, delivering, picking up, whatever the case is, come by the terminal at such and such time. We're going to have a barbecue. Come and fellowship, mingle. And by the way, my door is open. My office door is open if you need to talk to me. I'm going to be out there mingling with the drivers, but if you would like to talk to me in private, my door is open. You can come in anytime. and they just seeing the fellowship and the laughing and and I would sometimes have games. My secretary, she was real good at incorporating different games, fun games to do, and we would have team building stuff to do, and activities rather, and they just loved it. And some only had just a few minutes, a half hour or so to spend because they were on their way somewhere else. But that half hour, I guarantee you, they thought about that probably for the rest of that week or over the weekend. And they left revitalized, knowing that, hey, this company cares. I was able to come in and grab me a free meal and to talk and to get some things off my chest if need be. And just things like that all goes into retaining the driver once you get the drivers in the door and in the seat.
I can only imagine that a guy like you, Tim, 6'3", can put on a mean barbecue.
Oh yeah.
I bet that was one heck of a barbecue that I would love to attend at any point. You just say the word and I would be there.
All right. Oh, I loved it. I loved it. As a matter of fact, hey, if you want to come down from New York down to South Mississippi on the Gulf Coast, I'll be barbecuing this weekend.
Oh my God, just put me in a red eye. I'll be there. That sounds delicious. But Tim, it's interesting. We have Driver Appreciation Week every September. But I'm finding now, especially in the last 2 years, 3 years, during our softer freight environment, more companies, and I always recommend this, let's not just celebrate the 1 week of a year. Let's cultivate that culture of appreciation, whether it's a free meal or a thank you. Thank you, 2 simple words really go a long way. I mean, wouldn't you say? And people forget the power of just a good old-fashioned thank you.
An attaboy goes a long way, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Truck drivers will be the first to tell you, Jackie, that I'm not looking for a handout or a pat on the back, but every once in a while it's good to hear. Every once in a while, we all do. Just like, we were, before the podcast started, we were talking about my little dog, and if he does something good, he's looking for me to say, good job, good boy, and I'll reward him with a treat. So it doesn't matter if you, it doesn't matter who you are or what you are. You could be a pet, a cat, a dog, a hamster, or a human being. It doesn't matter. We all look for that. We all appreciate that, rather, whether we're looking for it or not. I mean, generally, even if you're not looking for it on a regular basis, you would like to hear it every once in a while, and that goes a long way in making the driver feel appreciated and making the driver feel welcome and loved. And this is what it's about. And the same thing with my show. I call it the Road Dog Family Morning Family Fellowship Meeting, and they look forward to it because it makes them feel that they are appreciated, makes them feel that they are a part of the family, which they are. And each company, don't do it just to retain the driver. Do it from your heart. It's got to be right, coming from right here.
I could agree with you more, and when it's coming from the heart versus when it's just coming because managers said this is what you should do. People could feel that, and I think, one silver lining during COVID is, we realize how important human connection is, and how important it is to feel as if we're in a community. Kind of talking even about your show every, Monday through Friday, your morning fellowship, right? And having that community, having that connection, it's so important. We were all isolated for so long, and drivers are often, by themselves for days, weeks on end. And so having as the managers or having, from the interior staff, the inside staff, being able to recognize their, contributions when deserved. I mean, that's huge. And I agree, not every driver, we know this, drivers don't want to give the, good boy every time, but they want to hear it as much as possible, and it really does go a long way. Tim, as we're wrapping up, I want to ask you, what would you say is the most important important lesson that you've learned in your career so far?
You just asked me a tough question, Jackie.
Tough one. Yeah.
I would probably, Jackie, have to say humility, just being continuing to be humble, continuing to have empathy and to be able to empathize and feel the pain of others, because it's a tough job out there. And as you started off with me telling telling about my career, I was out there, and it's easy to get beaten down while you're out there. And you just mentioned about being away from home and being lonely. So the art or the skill of having empathy is, I think that's one of the main things that I've learned, that I've learned rather in this industry right here.
That's a beautiful message, and that's really admirable, Tim. That's a big piece, and it's so important to have that humility in your daily interactions wherever you sit, right? Whether you're
Right.
CDL driver, manager, hosting a leading radio show. With that, Tim, where can our listeners find you if they don't already know who you are at this point?
Sure, Jackie. They can find me Monday through Fridays on the Tim Ridley Show on Sirius XM 146. Now, I'm on quite early. Now, in your neck of the woods, in the East, I'm on from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. In the West, it's from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. And in the middle is 4 in the Central Time Zone, 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. So, but you can get me on demand as well. Generally, Sirius XM keeps about 4, maybe 5 of my shows, and they rotate. So if you're not an early riser, you can still tune in at a later time.
That sounds great. And Tim, I'd love for you to share one last thing with the audience. You're heavily involved with the St. Christopher Fund. Could you talk more about the St. Christopher Fund to the audience?
Sure. I've been involved with I've been a board member, since 2008, around April of 2008. I was just stepped down actually from being vice president. I was vice president for the last few years. I just stepped down on the last day of this past December 31st, but I'm still actively involved. So what the St. Christopher Fund is, it was started actually by Dave Nemo, Dr. John McElligott, and also Michael Burns, who is Dave Nemo's business partner from Radio Nemo of North America. And I was kind of on the, although I didn't start it, but I was kind of on the ground level as well, because I was there in the office with them as they were talking about this and trying to come up with a name and so forth. But anyway, this is an organization that will help truck drivers to pay their medical bills or rent or whatever the case, car payment, truck payment, while they're down, while they're sick, or if they're injured. And it's a 501c nonprofit organization, and they have various other programs for health and wellness and just about anything that you need. You can go to truckersfund.org for more information and also to donate, because the St. Christopher Fund works primarily just on donations. That's it. And we have corporate donations, donors as well, from corporate companies and the individual. I don't care if it's $1, I don't care if it's 50 cents, I don't care if it's $5,000. Every dollar, every penny counts.
Incredible. Well, that concludes our episode with Attention Retention with Tim Ridley. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. It is truly an honor to have you on our show today, and roles reversed a little bit. So thank you so much for being on.
Yeah.
And thank you all to your listeners. Yeah. Thank you all to our listeners for tuning in. And remember, the road to success begins with effective recruitment, thoughtful retention, and genuine recognition. Feel free to share this knowledge with your peers and industry colleagues. Your sharing can make a difference. Together, we can empower the industry to thrive. Until next time, thank you, everyone.